Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. At the edge of possibility, we fuse science, spirit, and adventure, alongside healers, scientists, pioneers, and mystics to turn potential into practice, create real results. Subscribe and join me on the adventure. Welcome
Cynthia
to the
Sue
Derek
Larson,
Loudermilk Show. At the
Thank you,
edge
Derek.
of possibility,
I'm so glad to be talking
we
with you
fuse science,
about my favorite
spirit,
subjects.
and adventure.
Wonderful to meet you.
Alongside
And
healers,
just finished your book,
scientists, pioneers, and
the
mystics.
Mandela Effect
Turn
and its
potential
society.
into practice. Create
So,
real results.
Maybe you could start with,
Subscribe
actually, could we
and
start with
join
just
me
how you got
on the
into studying the Mandela Effect?
Right. Well, before it was called the Mandela Effect, I was studying something that I was seeking a name for because I was observing things appearing, disappearing, transforming, and transporting, and changes in time. And it occurred to me this is something big that people are experiencing, just like this is back in the 1990s now, when I was really noticing I need to create a website about it. I think I need to start talking to people about this. This is big. And so the missing sock in the laundry was the classic one back in the 90s. Now, for people that are listening and they can't imagine a time before social media, it was before social media. So it was kind of a totally different realm of websites before AI, before large language models and everything. So back then, in the 90s, I just started publishing sort of a newsletter that I would email out to people and people that were interested in the topic, because I was finding out, yes, people are interested in the topic, but they're kind of embarrassed to talk about it publicly, and especially if things are appearing or moving around. They figure that people would call them crazy back in the 1990s. I have a physics degree from UC Berkeley, so I should put that out there too. Part of what convinced me that this is much more than just people confused who are misremembering things, misplacing things, is that it was clear to me that humans on a very macroscopic scale in large, wet biological conditions are capable of experiencing phenomena that we consider normal in the so-called quantum realm. So with the combination of my own experiences, the new experiences that I'm starting to research and collect from people sharing them with me, and then I was publishing on a monthly basis and through my website and through the email newsletter, that's how it became really clear to me. This is something that's real. And then I found other researchers that were writing books about it too, such as the author PMH Atwater. I found her book, Future Memory, and she had a chapter called Reality Shifts. So for me, it started, and I was already calling these reality shifts, so I contacted her and found out that indeed, she considered it a real phenomenon too, and just something that may not be popular yet, but it's a growing trend. And then fast forward to the early 2000s, and my website at that point had been running for a number of years, and Fiona Broome was the person who popularized the term Mandela Effect. And she did so after she went to a Dragon Con conference and noticed a bunch of people remembered, hey, didn't Nelson Mandela die in prison? Like, yeah, well then how is he becoming like the president of South Africa or whatever? How is he still alive? And there was a little bit of confusion going back and forth, like, what is this? And at that point, I'd already written my first book about this called Reality Shifts. And in that book, I'd covered both a dead cat of my roommate being back alive again, and also the actor Larry Hagman being alive again. So I've absolutely been covering this topic that we now call the Mandela Effect for over 25 years.
And before it was the Mandela Effect.
That's right, before
Wow.
it was the Mandela Effect.
Wow, what a privilege to have you on. Did you tie this in with your physics work when you were starting?
Yes, it seemed clear to me that there was a connection, but only in my most recent book, The Mandela Effect and Its Society, am I starting to really lay it out in terms of here are some possible theories, and this is the way physicists talk about physics, and then side by side with a sort of a dictionary or a lexicon of typical language that experiencers use when they notice that, for example, there's a flip-flop, that a situation is one way, and then they look again and it's the other way, and then it goes back to the first way, and they're paying more attention and it's still changing. So that kind of thing is very confusing. But when you think about physics and recognize that everything can be seen to exist in a superposition of states, at least on the so-called quantum realm, and I'm laughing because I don't think there is such a thing. I think everything responds this way when you engage with it in a certain manner. So we can absolutely observe superpositions of states in our daily lives, such as what is known as this so-called flip-flop, where you're looking at something and my neighbor's roof didn't have gutter guards, and then I'd look back and it did, and it was going back and forth every other day for about a week or so. It was just doing this repeatedly to the point I could point it out to other members of my household. And that's a small-scale Mandela effect. It's just my household, and I already knew from experience if I talk to the neighbors, then the situation kind of locks in place a bit. Like if I talk to them, like, did you get new leaf guards? They'll say, no, what leaf guards? And they'll be gone. And like, I saw them. I saw them. They were there without any noise, no construction crew. It was just sort of there and then gone and then back and forth. So, and in my book, Reality Shifts, I show pictures reenacting situations where I'd filled a bird feeder and it was full and then it was empty and then it was like full. So people, when that happens, you might be scratching your head and wondering, am I imagining things? You can check with other friends, family members, colleagues, find out if they also remember it. But what gets exciting about the Mandela effect is the scale, because now it's moving into a much larger arena of where thousands or maybe millions of people can experience a change, a collective alternate memory. That's how I define the Mandela effect. And we'd experience it together.
Is that why you have the "it's society" part in the title of the book?
Yes, because this is a topic where it can still be a personal Mandela effect, which I think that's just fine. I think for most people, that is where it starts. If you're fortunate enough to have other witnesses when something bizarre occurs, it's great. But we don't always have that many witnesses. It just feels so much better when you do, because then it's otherwise it can be seriously confusing when you witness these sorts of things.
Speaking of the house situation, one of the first Mandela effects that I personally experienced was from one winter to the next, we had different windows on our house. Wow. And I used to put this plastic over the windows for the cold months to be extra insulation. And all of a sudden there was like 5 windows so our house is over 100 years old, and there was 5 windows that had 40-year-old storm windows on them instead of 100-year-old storm windows. And I was like, that's so weird. So it was like, they're still old, but they're much more modern than the, wood
Yes.
frame storm windows.
Oh, yes. And these things could happen almost at any time. I have some silk window curtains that I had unfortunately shrunk when I washed them in hot water stupidly. I know, decades ago. And then like 20 years later, after feeling like, gee, this is so annoying, I wish that I hadn't done that. I love these curtains, but they shrank. And then it just, they sort of unshrank, which is ridiculous. That never happens. I've never seen anything like that happen. And after 20 years, and they unshrank exactly to the old size that they'd been, as if I'd never washed them in hot water to begin with.
Huh.
And it was evenly. So it's not like an uneven thing. It was all at once. And I was thinking the night before it happened, I was just super annoyed. Like, darn, I just wish that had never happened. And then the next morning, the whole thing was drooping. Like the curtains didn't fit on the hanger anymore, which annoyed me until I realized, oh my gosh, they're exactly the right size again. So I need to rehang the curtains, but it's worth it.
How much do you think the Mandela effect is tied to, like, you saying, like, oh, I wish it was different, versus just a totally random and innocuous change?
Perfect question. Yeah, there is something that we call the observer effect in physics, and there's a tremendously strong connection there. And you've heard the old adage that correlation does not prove, causation. But when I interview people, when they share their firsthand report of one of these reality shifts with me, I often ask them, what were you thinking? What were you feeling when this event occurred? And it's very, across the board, very consistent that if people, one of the most common reality shifts is traveling farther in less time. So it's an experience where you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm late. It's going to take 30 minutes to get to the appointment, and I'm leaving and I've only got 15 minutes to get there. A lot of people notice that if they just relax and kind of sing their favorite songs, kind of, instead of getting all tense about it, change their mindset and just tell themselves, I'm always at the right place at the right time, or ask, how good can it get? My favorite setup question. Then they do show up amazingly on time, quite often, not all the time, but quite often, exactly on time, which is impossible because they weren't speeding, they didn't break laws, they weren't running their red lights. And so, yeah, it's absolutely clear to me from decades now of research and my own personal experience that yes, and it ties in with physics as well. The physics doesn't talk about the attitude of the observer, but truthfully, if you are in a very relaxed, grounded state and you're just expecting success, it's kind of like beginner's mindset, beginner's luck, then you'll have things quite often turn out miraculously well against all odds and against what we know about what's possible. Like you can't drive that far in 15 minutes, but people are doing it. They're covering, hundreds of miles in a very short time and wondering, was I daydreaming? What happened? How did I get here so fast? It's a very common reality shift. So I'm mentioning it so people might realize, oh my gosh, I think I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was playing around with time bending and wanted to test out how far I could push it. And so I didn't look at my clock the whole day, but I had to be on time to pick up my kids from school. And I scheduled like so many things in the day just to see how it would go. And we like went across the river to Illinois to another state. We did like a 40-mile bike ride. We went out for lunch. We went shopping. We did all this stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, how's this going to work out? We arrived like right as the kids were walking out. Like we were walking up, they were walking out, and it was like we were more on time than anybody else who had got there, early or late. And I was like, oh my gosh. But then I wanted to do that driving across country, like from out to Colorado from Missouri is like a 12-hour, 14-hour drive. And I was like, oh, this is great. I know how to do it now. And it didn't, and I was like, didn't work. And I was like, I really wanted to skip ahead and arrive, skip Kansas basically. But,
right. No offense to Kansas. Yeah.
Yeah. So
wow.
what's your explanation for why it might work one day when I'm playing around and then another day when, I really wanted to shave some time off my cross-country journey and didn't really do anything?
Well, ironically, detachment actually helps with the outcome. So if you're sort of constantly watch checking or clock checking, like how are we doing? Ah, shoot, we're still in Kansas, then what's happening is you're kind of like, it's tied in with something called the quantum Zeno effect, where you're observing. And if you're doing that, even if you're not doing it on purpose, then you're not in the proper daydream detached state. So for best success, ironically, you need to kind of let go of it's okay if I'm in Kansas and not even think about Kansas or how fast you're going or what time it is or where we are. Just I don't want to say this, don't do this. This is not an advocation for people to do this. Do not daydream when you're driving. But if you happen to be daydreaming, you will have probably found that it was more successful. So
so what about in a
state
group situation,
yeah.
like a group of people in a car driving across? Like what if the driver is in the right state, but everyone else is constantly checking? How would that interact?
Well, to the degree that you guys are coherent, entangled with each other, the coherence is like a flock of sheep or a herd of sheep or a flock of birds. Sorry. Yeah. So I get the animals straight. So if you are noticing this is not a very coherent group, then you might want to do the quantum sheep herding thing, kind of like round people up, like, hey, let's everybody sing a song. We'll take turns. What's your favorite song? I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, but okay, we're just going to sing it. So you want to get them into coherence. And whatever that takes, maybe they don't want to do it because they're busy arguing or whatever. But if they'll join in, you can start getting the coherence because you're getting breathing, and music's great because it can bring people into that state. They're probably not going to be chanting Om, but if you had that kind of group, they wouldn't be uncoherent in the first place, probably. But if they are, then you can bring them back. So you want to get them into that coherent state. And then as the group is like a flock or a herd, then when you, the driver, kind of get into that relaxed theta state, but drive safely, of course. So again, operating heavy machinery, I'm not telling you to daydream. I'm just saying if you happen to be already daydreaming, and if you know you're safe, then it's okay. So, but I can't advocate that.
I remember you saying there was another common reality shift, which was the teleported to safety. And that actually happened to me on the drive to Colorado. I was
Whoa.
moving out there and a deer jumped in front of my car and I was going to come through the windshield. And I was like, oh my
Oh
gosh,
my
this is the
gosh.
end. And I closed my eyes and
Mm.
it was like the deer was like in a different place and I was farther down the road. And I was like, that's impossible.
Right. Well, blinking your eyes shut for this, again, don't do this if you're driving usually. But if you happen to do that, it's actually kind of a good thing because you're giving reality permission to do something unexpected. So I notice that that's true if I'm looking for something that I need in the cupboard and I just shut the cupboard, walk away, come back, look again. Shut the cupboard, walk away, come back, look again. I'm giving it privacy. Like, okay, Spice, you can come back and I'm not going to look. Okay, now I'm going to look. Are you there? Or whatever's missing. But that has worked for me sometimes. And in this case, yeah, teleported to safety is very common. I think it's because people need it. There's something that happens when you're in that moment. You probably felt it, which is all of you was in one harmonious accord. You know, there's a brain in the cranium, of course. I think it's called the cephalic brain. Then there's the cardio heart brain. And now we know there's an enteric gut brain. And the gut runs the show. When you just know, like, I need to be safe. Like, this cannot happen. And that's like a gut feeling. And then your heart feels the same. Your head feels the same. And then you just blink your eyes shut for a moment. And so you're not quantum Zeno effect locking it. Quantum Zeno effect means you're looking at something so often that you're locking it possibly in the wrong reality. So you don't want to be looking. And that's what you did. You just didn't look. And then you look again and it's quite different. Yeah, so many people have experienced that. And it's against all odds. And I wouldn't have expected that would be a common thing, but I've come to find out it is. But there's a very strong discouraging factor here where people don't feel safe talking about it publicly. So if I do talk about it at a talk, I'll get swarmed with people afterward whispering to me, this happened to me. But they don't want to go on record. They don't want anyone to know. There's a stigma
More
attached
than
to it.
other
Yeah.
reality shift effects?
I think this one is the one with the strongest stigma attached to it because people
interesting.
know, they're just certain. No one's going to believe me. They'll think I'm really nuts. They'll think I can't judge distance. Like if someone heard your story, they'd be nodding and then they'd be thinking he had no clue what was going on. He just thought it was in front of him and going to hit the windshield. He was a little, they're doing this for themselves, to calm themselves, so that everything fits back in their mental construct instead of, if this really happened to Derek, then what does that mean for reality? That's the hard question. And not everyone's going to go there.
I did actually share that story as I was sort of reading that in your book, and a lot of people were like, you died in one timeline and then your consciousness went into another timeline where you survived, like you actually did die. So what is that a valid theory?
Yes, and a physicist first came up with that originally. I'd cover this in my book about the Mandela Effect, and I described a situation where people noticed that I had died around 2016, 2017 of something that I was actually, it was a time when I actually almost did die. So I think that was fascinating and amazing. And I had just the right readership and audience to be able to confirm with them as soon as I'd heard from somebody I'd never met before. He's passed away now. Stephen Boucher from Canada wrote to me and said, you don't know me, but I'm so glad that you are here. And I see you posted something recently, which surprised me because I remember that you died. So, of course, I wanted to follow up. Like, oh, tell me more. I'm not upset at all. Like, no, I don't think you're crazy. I'd like to know, when did you hear this? What had happened? How did you find out? Give me all the details without me telling him anything. And then everything he shared with me, I started noticing it's dovetailing with a time in my life that I almost did give up on life. I had pneumonia. I was feeling emotional betrayals. And I just felt like, what's the point? People do mean things, whatever. I'm just going. But then in my reality, what I remember is the me that's still here, or the versions, plural or whatever, the versions of me that made it through, I or we or whatever, decided that my life is bigger than just my own. And so what if I got betrayed? It matters more than it's not just selfish for me to be here until I get, betrayed. But I'll deal with whatever this betrayal costs, the money, the time, the court, whatever. Like, okay, I'll do it. It's worth it for other people, so I'll do this. And then I just felt so much stronger. It's like, I'll just do it, whatever it is. And it didn't feel overwhelming. The pneumonia in my lungs instantly started feeling like it was just a cold that was going to clear up. Even though I told my husband and my parents and my daughters, like, I think I'm dying. This is really bad, But it turned around with that decision. And fascinatingly, people noticed this, and I write about it in my book because I think it's a very interesting report. And who better to tell it than someone like myself who's been researching this. So I do believe people when they say, I think maybe I died. And that is how people take it. That could be why there's a stigma about this one, because it's almost embarrassing to say, I'm a ghost. Like, what are you saying here? That's like, what does this mean? And it's not a ghost. You're not a ghost. In my case, I'm the one who decided I'll do what it takes. I'll be brave and strong and stand up to all these indignities and all the issues and problems and hardships and all my buttons getting pushed emotionally at once. Yeah, I'll deal with this because it's worth it for my value, what I'm doing for the world. It's not me that decides that. So that was for me what it took. But I think in that moment when you're about to hit a deer, you're not thinking any of that. You're just in that moment. And that's a very common experience. And I think reality wants us to wake up. I think consciousness is playing with us. You might say playing, that was pretty rough play. But it wants to get our attention. We are consciousness. We are reality. So we're getting our own attention. And to me, it looks like it's a time of great awakening. So I am noticing this happening much more. And now, more than 25 years later, people are saying, go ahead, print my full name. It's okay. That was not what people said in the 1990s.
Well, I think you mentioned that for some people, you are a Mandela effect in the sense that your research, and I don't remember coming across your research before this year either. So I was wondering,
Yes.
maybe you're a Mandela effect in my experience, like you and your body of work.
Yes.
Arriving with this like decades of wonderful research. How fortunate, you know?
That's true. And at conferences for the Mandela Effect, back when we were doing those, people were telling me, I knew Dolores Cannon's work, but I didn't know yours. And the other people said, oh, I knew Cynthia Sue Larson, but I didn't know Dolores Cannon. So it seemed like there was almost a bifurcation going on for some people. Like either they knew Dolores or they knew me, but usually not both. That was weird. But it goes with the whole topic.
By the way, Dolores Cannon grew up basically 1 block from where we live.
What?
Yeah.
Ah.
And my wife is a QHHT practitioner, and we had heard she grew up in St. Louis, and we were like, so we honed in on the address by muscle testing.
Okay.
And it turns out, because we found that she was in this general area, and then we muscle tested, and she was a block away, basically, across the street from where our friends live right now, which is wild. But so here's something interesting, because my wife she's right along where I am, understanding all this research and, works in the quantum with her clients and all this stuff. But we had this incident that I shared with you about our daughter's jacket duplicating itself.
Yes.
And she is like, that doesn't count as metaphysical, because it's probably just we brought home someone else's exact jacket because we picked it up because we thought it was our daughter's, and now we have 2 copies.
Sure.
Like a normal linear explanation. And I feel like that's a lot of people's tendency, is to try to explain a weird effect by like, oh, well, here's how it could have happened. Theoretically it's possible, XYZ. How often do you deal with that type of experience?
Because of what you just said, people tend to assume like I must have just had another one, or I picked up another one. Our mind wants to make it make sense. And so I don't get as many reports like this, but I do hear about them. And I heard about them in a presentation that was made in that first conference that we had for the Mandela Effect in November 2019 in Ketchum, Idaho, and also the next year in 2020. One of those people that was presenting at that time was talking about just a duplicate item showing up, and it had the same markings, and it was like a tool of the trade, like an artist's tool. I think it was a ruler, and it's like, here's the exact same ruler. Now I have 2 of them. This is really weird. And so I think there's again, maybe a stigma on this one. So I'm not hearing as many reports of it. That may change now that you're mentioning it, you're talking about it. But I have a question for you. When you and your wife had that thought, did you then check it out? Because that's a good thing to do. Go back to the place where you picked up the jacket and find out.
Well, nobody can remember ever like bringing an extra jacket home. It's just like we went into the closet and there was 2.
Oh, okay.
So it's like there is a plausible explanation, but nobody's fessing up to it, right?
Okay. So then
And
the next step, if you want to, is you could take it to where if you're able to still go back and it hasn't been too long, say, did anyone lose this jacket? And then,
yeah, but
maybe
we don't
they,
even know like where we would have gotten it, right? Maybe the kid's school, but who knows?
right?
Yeah. That was, and then a friend of mine had just shared yesterday where she had her hand full of marbles and her toddler was counting them. And she put one marble in and had him count one, and then two and had him count two, and then three, and then four, and then he counted five. And she was like, no, that's four. Try again. And then she looked and there was a fifth marble and it had just like appeared in her hand.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's not too common either, but I've had it happen to me, not with a marble, but like a half gallon of milk landing inside a closed refrigerator. I heard it land and I was just talking about how I wish I had more milk for all these kids who are here today, and then thump inside the fridge.
It
I
made a
open it.
thunk.
It made a thump, but that often
Whoa.
happens. So when I see things materialize, they usually drop from usually a couple inches, like 2 or 3 inches. It's happened a few times. Although sometimes, like that time I kept pulling dollar bill after dollar bill out of my wallet when I needed to give a cash tip to a waitress, I just kept shutting the wallet. So again, it's that privacy. Just give it a moment. Stay open-minded. We need another dollar. Let's see if there's another one here, kids. Because I was with my young daughters at the time. Kids are great. They're very open to this sort of thing. So they're like, it doesn't really occur to them that this should not be possible yet. So I'm open-minded. They were open-minded. And I just kept telling them, I think, is this enough for the tip? Because I told them we need however many dollars, like $6 or whatever. They said, no, let's look again. So we just kept opening this magic. It wasn't a magic wallet, just my regular wallet. We'd open it again, pull out another dollar bill. Like, that's it. But let me shut it and we'll see. Do we, should we look again? Like,
Wow. Wow.
so much fun.
You did this multiple times.
Multiple times. But with children who are just the best, because again, until they've been told such things are impossible, they don't know. The beginner's mind is strong, so you're able to see the true reality much more readily. And my daughters were telling me things like, my toy moved by itself, and I believed them. They were not lying to me, but we're sort of an open household that way. So if that happened, then I was interested. Which toy? What did it do? My toy horse, it moved its the mane, the hair that's on it moved. Like, okay, which way did it move? I was just curious. Like, tell me more. Instead of like, that's impossible.
Yeah. I was in Sedona. I was leading a retreat last month, actually, and we had a UFO viewing guide, and she had all the high-tech stuff. And, on the way out to the desert, she stopped and did like a Bigfoot hoot. She was like,
Yeah.
coming out. And then one of the things that she did really well, and I guess this is what a good, UFO viewing guide would do. Someone would be like, I saw some eyes in the bushes. She's like, I didn't see it, but I believe you.
Uh-huh.
And reaffirming, that she believes like what you're experiencing and that it might be totally different from what the rest of the group is seeing.
That's really true for that phenomenon for CE5 UFO viewing and Bigfoot, that you can have subjective experiences that are wildly divergent and they can all be true. And that's part of the nature of reality too. And it's the heart of a paper that I co-authored with one of the hippies who saved physics, Dr. George Weissman. So we wrote about that. It's available on my website. You can just grab the paper and read it if you want. It's like subjectivity.
The hippies who saved physics.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that before.
Oh, it's a book. Oh, it's a great book by David Kaiser, and it features Dr. Quantum from What the Bleep Do We Know? That's my friend Fred Allen Wolf. It features some of the other folks as well. The Elizabeth Rauscher was the lady that first started the group, and that was at UC Berkeley, right where I'm right in Berkeley right now. So the group started there, and some of the people, the original members, are still in the Bay Area. And they didn't want to just shut up and calculate it. They wanted to know, what's the real nature of reality? What are we learning from quantum physics? They wanted to go deep into that mystery. And at that time, when quantum physics was new, people were told, shut up and calculate. We just need the bomb. We just need atomic energy. So don't think about these big questions. But these are the people that thought about the big questions. So yeah, Jack Sarfati was another one. He's still alive. This is quite a while ago, so Elizabeth Rauscher has passed on. But Fred Allen Wolf is still with us. Jack Sarfati is still with us. And George Weissman. So, and some other people too. Henry Stapp, he doesn't make a big deal out of being there, but he was there too. And he's a wonderful author and physicist. And he worked with Wolfgang Pauli, the guy that knew Carl Jung and was credited with helping him coin the term synchronicity. So it's kind of a small world. These people know each other, and I know them, and they're very significant in the way that we now view reality and consciousness and quantum physics. I think we need to give a lot of credit to these early pioneers.
Would it be possible for you to summarize your current view of how reality works?
It's ever changing. And so I know that I'm not trying to be evasive, but we don't yet have a standard. People may assume it's quantum physics. There's got to be some agreed upon interpretation. Like when these hippies who say physics looked at it, then what did they agree on? No agreement yet. I had a little quantum paradigm evening at my house where I asked all these physicists to please come and give a 10-minute synopsis of your favorite theory. And they were all very different. And these are the folks that were interested in, what's really happening. So some people prefer to look at this idea of kind of this, it's if you're familiar with watching What the Bleep Do We Know, then they share no, you don't know that movie? Oh, it's worth watching.
I don't know it.
Oh my gosh, got to see it. So it's been out for a while now, but it presents this idea of the multiverse and that there are all these different possibilities. And it also talks about how we are the observers that are basically influencing what we observe by the way that we observe it. So I think that movie kind of fell into sort of obscurity because it features Ramtha. And so some people aren't into channeled material. But if you don't like the channeled material, just focus on the physics of it. It's still really powerful. And the biology in ourselves, what makes us so special that we can observe things differently. So it's pretty cool. And so to answer your question, I like a lot of the theories. So many of them have, I think quantum physics is kind of like the blind man and the elephant. So we can say it's just the Bohmian interpretation where you're popping the wave function and you observe it and then you see the way you're observing it. So that's basically the Copenhagen interpretation. Then there's the transactional interpretation saying that you can actually influence the past, and we do it all the time. That's true. We do. So I love the transactional interpretation. I love the multiverse theory, which the first one of those was founded by Hugh Everett III. And that's just saying that all these, it's kind of like when we talked earlier, like this is the version of me that's alive and some dead version of me actually hit the deer or died of pneumonia or what have you. Yeah, so I like a lot of these, and I like the holographic interpretation by David Bohm that says that the way you look at things, it's like the whole is unfolded into the small, so you can unfold it and refold it. There's this sort of it's like a gallon of paint that has a red drop in the white, and as you stir it, it gets mixed up, and then as you you can unstir it, it comes back separate again. The David Bohm holographic interpretation is like the little man that's mapped into the ear. So if you do acupressure with the ear, you're fixing your whole body. So it's the awareness that the small is, it contains everything within you. I think that's true. So I'm not being cagey or evasive. I'm just saying, yes, this is the trunk of the elephant. These are the feet. This is the legs. So there's definitely a transactional component. There is a multiverse component. There is an observer component. And I think quantum physics is playing with us until we find a way to pull it all together. And so far, we haven't really done that. Maybe it'll come with mathematics, guiding us with something like I don't want to get too obtuse with the mathematics again, but there are some topographies and geometries that are indicative that the mathematics will be changing. I think with AI, it'll be playing with these mathematics, going into higher level dimensionality and showing us now it all comes together. There's this, higher dimensions bring in an orthogonal quality, which is the theory that Philip K. Dick had about he knew that reality was shifting. He noticed, he gave a talk in France talking in the, decades ago about how you might just go one day to flip a light switch or something and it's in a different place. It's not where it was before. He was very cognizant that this is happening. And so I include those experiences in the book that I just wrote too, because Carl Jung also experienced it, and possibly others also were experiencing these things, and we didn't have a term for it. So these are data points that are very valuable. So I like a lot of the theories, and I'm still looking for what's the holy grail to put it all together. may require higher mathematics to do that. I think we may see it in our lifetime now that I'm not the biggest fan of AI because it has a lot of garbage. So you have to observe what its results are. But with these kind of tools, it can start, I think it's good at mathematics. It can be. And so it can start showing us how are ways that we can put these things together. And then it's going to be up to us. Can we catch up and follow what it's saying? Can our brains grasp this? Can we process that?
Can you talk about, I think there was an experiment, a retrocausality experiment influencing backwards through time. Maybe there's more than one, but if you know that one.
There have been several, yeah. And usually they work with the most elegant experiment, the double slit experiment. So that's a good one because that's the one, if people are not familiar, then there's one quantum particle, like a photon, being emitted, usually one at a time, that goes through this passageway of two slits in a screen, and then it lands on the final screen. And so based on where the observational device or lack thereof occurs, you can basically, what's going to happen with the photon emitter. And so what makes this so interesting with the, observing, this through time and watching what happens, can a present or future observation affect what happened in the past? The answer appears to definitely be yes. And so that can be measured by the way that these observational devices are placed with a future decision influencing where that went and then what happened. And so it gets kind of complicated pretty quickly, but that apparatus has been very useful for determining that. And it also is extremely useful in showing that you can have two observers at the same place at the same time, witnessing two different realities. And to me, that was a breakthrough finding from 2019, which I think deserved to be on front page news because it ties in with what we're witnessing. Those of us that are like your wife working with QHHT, any of us that are aware, very intimately aware that reality is completely malleable and that the way we're observing things is making a difference, then we also usually start noticing that if you talk about something that happened in your childhood with your childhood friend or your sibling or your parents, they don't remember it the way you did. And they may have very detailed descriptions of what happened, and you might find out that's so different than what I remembered happening. That is actually normal. That actually happens a lot more than people realize. And both can be true. And that's where it gets trippy. And so all of this factors into this matter of the future affecting the past. That you can be affecting your own past in ways that are different than your siblings, than your childhood friend, than your parents are. And you're therefore ending up with a different past than theirs. And this is totally...
I had a guest on my show a few years ago telling me about they had done some trauma healing work with a client, and their client reported that they went back, so it was around like their family and stuff, and they went back and looked at family photo albums because they had sort of changed their perspective on the events that had happened, and they went and the photo album was different. It was like these common family events were photographed completely differently based on the work that they had done to resolve some of these issues. And that was quite profound for me.
Wow.
When I heard that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and it matches what some of the reporters who were early on covering the Mandela Effect were noticing. Some of them noticed family photos changing. And which is something that the reporters who were just trying to be objective covering the topic, like, okay, the Mandela Effect, why do people believe in this crazy thing? And then the next thing they know, a family photo on the wall is different than it used to be, which was mind-blowing. And the reporter covered that as well, saying, like, this just happened to me.
So like traditional journalists, you mean, who started reporting on this?
And so this Mandela Effect topic is going mainstream because it's showing up on game shows on TV, the New York Times crossword puzzle, regular journalists covering it and noticing this is happening to me. So it's increasingly coming into just, the public lexicon, although people may still attribute it to a different cause than I would. I notice my definition would be collective alternate memory. And currently, if you look it up on, Wikipedia, you might find it says something like collective misremembering, false memories, collective false memories, all that sort of thing. I agree with the collective part, but I would not call them false memories. These are alternate memories. And you can tell the difference for yourself when it's your childhood or your family photo album, and you know what those photos used to be. Even though now the only proof you could ever get of it is to draw a sketch of what you remember and ask other family members, okay, can you draw a picture of what it used to be? Because you have to recreate it at this point. It's not, although
have you seen the people that have like an old video camera and hold it up to the Berenstain Bears book and it shows how it used to be, and then they hold the book up and it shows Berenstain, but when in the viewfinder of the old camera it shows Berenstain, like it allows you to look through to the other reality?
Yeah, to me that looks like just, filmmaking creativity, just playfulness with the medium, because I've not yet ever seen any or heard anyone writing or sharing with me, like, I've got one of those devices. It works. Do you want to see it? Let's, I'll bring it to a conference. I'll show you. Nothing like that's happened. So
Okay.
until it's something like that, where like, oh my gosh, they really do have something. It really does this. I wouldn't really put a lot of stock in that. But it does kind of go along with the human tendency to think that there's some technological magic, like we'll have a device that'll do this. People, we love these toys, and so I think we're kind of enchanted with that idea. Like, oh look, it's happening. But I haven't yet seen anything doing that.
That would be really cool to be able to peer through. But then it's like, where are we peering into? Like, what version of reality? Like, okay, it's giving us this result of this Mandela experience that we know, but are we actually looking into the parallel reality that we remember?
Right.
If we had some sort of looking device. So, yeah, how does it happen then that let's take the common one, the Nelson Mandela, like, what is going on that reality no longer exists where he died in prison?
Yeah. Well, let's go through it. Let's start with, it was in 1987 that some people remember quite clearly that he passed away. And there's a woman who is an author in a book, Mandela Effect, Friend or Foe, Eileen Colts. And I share this in my book as well. These are things I cover, but you can also look up her book. She was a reporter that went to South Africa to cover. She wanted to interview Nelson Mandela. So she went for that purpose. It was 1987, so she knows when it happened. And she got there and she couldn't interview him because he had died. So she knows that happened. She was a reporter. I think she was a reporter in England, also a reporter, I believe, in the United States. So I think she was traveling from England when she went there. I can't ask her now because she's passed away. But she did write about it in her book. And I think that's a good starting point, because that pinpoints a date and a time frame and a place. Now, subsequent to that, obviously, if you look this up, you might say, like, wait a minute, I remember Nelson Mandela died like 10 years ago or so, and he became president of South Africa. How could he do that if he was imprisoned? Well, what people share when, like myself and others, get together and talk about this, and this is true for people typically not in South Africa. I think Eileen could do that while she was there because she was from outside South Africa. So the people that are quantum Zeno effect, checking. It's just the observe, kind of like your OCD about something. If you live in South Africa, to them, he never died. He was imprisoned on Robben's Island, but he didn't die there. He was released from prison. He regained stature in the community. Then he went on to run for president, became president, so on and so forth. But for outside of the country, I've received reports from lots of people that I respect and trust who say that they remember where they were when they heard about it, when he died. They were in school and their teacher used it as a teaching moment and talked about what's going on in South Africa and apartheid and all that. So they remember all sorts of details about his widow, because when he died, when he was incarcerated, his widow wanted rightfully to retain some of his estate, and there was a whole big legal mess that happened for when he died in prison. A lot of us remember that, but now it never happened. There was no legal mess. So anyway, so it's kind of like two reality paths in general, two big ones. But there could be lots of little details that are different for each independent observer based on where they were. Like, oh, my teacher told us about apartheid. I know when he died, and I remember that well. And that was someone that wrote to me from France. In America, I remember it vaguely, but I do remember it. Wasn't the main thing I was paying attention to, but it was something like, yeah, I do remember that. So it was weird when he was alive again.
And are there circumstances that would push our shared reality to sort of lock into the way it is now?
Forces that would push it. Consciousness is the prime. I mean, this whole phenomenon gets us to investigate who are we and what's reality. And so if you go back that far, then I would agree with the physicists and the people who are currently saying consciousness is at the root of everything. So what we think is real is basically like a dream or a simulation, which are similar ways of saying the same thing. So if that's true, then what's pushing reality? We all are. We all have a causative effect on the reality that we're co-creating. And to the degree that we can become self-reflective and metacognitive, in other words, aware that, like, I, Cynthia, am now talking with Derek. If I can take this view of, and then I can start talking as Cynthia is now feeling inspired by these questions and challenged to try to express this in a clear way. So I'm noticing what Cynthia is thinking and feeling. But who am I if I can do that? That's the metacognition. If I'm able to notice Cynthia's pretty grounded now, pretty calm, that's not me noticing. It's like I'm looking down. I'm seeing myself. So to the degree we can do that, we are pushing reality. But I think what you're getting at, are there dark forces or something maybe? Or are we in a battle between good and evil? That's where people often go there with that.
Yeah. I guess my question was broader in, like, what would, let's say it could go either way. Like, we could remember and the history could reflect, oh, he did die in prison. Like, what would tip it over the edge one way or the other, kind of thing?
Yeah, for a lot of people who weren't, if you happen to be living in South Africa, then for you, probably due to the quantum xeno effect, in other words, hearing about Nelson Mandela constantly. Is he still in jail? Yeah, he's still in jail. How's he holding up? Pretty good. I mean, as best as can be expected. He's healthy anyway. So they're doing that. Check on. So he never died for them. But if you're outside of that range and you're not checking on Nelson Mandela every day, hearing about him almost every day, then he's kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's like shutting the cupboard and me hoping, I hope the spice just decides to return. That would be so cool. So it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. Weird things can happen. So out of sight, out of mind, not checking every day. We just hear the news, oh, he passed away. And there's shock. Like, what? Why? What happened? How did he die? I guess old age, if he was killed, nobody's admitting it. Like, that's suspicious. Well, what happened? Was he sick? So we're asking questions, we're remembering it. So it's a different experience if you're in it or out of it. So pushing it. But the case that I think you're really getting at is, what if you remember it both ways? That one's a little hard to remember it both ways. Although for someone like me that's outside of South Africa, I'm the only one. It would have to be outside of South Africa to be able to remember it both ways. To remember, I think he was okay in jail. Did he die? And then I'd start questioning my own memory. That one wasn't a super strong one for me personally, but for me, Larry Hagman, the actor, was much stronger. Or my roommate's cat that died and then was back alive again. So those were super clear. Both of those, like, oh, I know for sure. Larry Hagman died. He went into surgery and died, right afterward. Like, he did not survive that operation. They kind of stitched him up. But now that never happened. That happened so long ago, very few people remember that one. But I've met a few.
Ooh, I actually have a fun story, because I sent your book to my dad for him to read. He's a scientist by training and career, and so I was like, oh great, a scientist writing a book about this stuff, who I think there's like permission to consume weird material if a qualified scientist is there explaining it. And on my Instagram, a video of someone showing, it was one of the James Bond films where the girl like doesn't have braces, but the
Dolly.
whole joke is,
Yeah.
Which one is that?
Her name, I think, is Dolly. In the character's name, Dolly.
In which film was it?
Oh gosh, the other character is Jaws.
Gold.
It could be. I'm not.
Goldeneye. Goldfinger.
Maybe. I don't remember exactly which one it was.
Anyway, so okay, but the story is, it pops up on my Instagram, and it's like this person explaining the Mandela effect and showing a clip.
Okay.
Look, here, She doesn't have braces in the film. Why would they include this scene, which is like this big joke?
Yes.
And everyone remembers her having braces. And then I told my dad about it. And he's like, look, I just finished reading this paragraph, like just before you arrived. And I was like, whoa, that's synchronicity. But it was,
Yes.
since I sent in the book, we've had a few like cool,
Synchronicity. Yeah.
interesting synchronicities. Yeah.
Nice. Well, to me, the synchronicity is a form of reality shift and Mandela effect. It's the way that consciousness is playing with reality. Like, guys, did you get that? Did you see that? So it feels like there's a level of our own consciousness inviting us to level up, to pay more attention, not to be asleep at the wheel, but to recognize, like, what if we are creating quite a bit of what's going on around us? How might that play out? Well, like a synchronicity, obviously. And Dr. Bernard Beitman, I mentioned his work quite a bit in my book about the Mandela Effect, because he points out the synchronicity and meaningful coincidence happens when people are open-minded and they're looking for what is the nature of reality. They're asking the meta questions, and they're also having that kind of metacognition that I've been talking about. So these are the activating requirements. Once you've got these, then you're good to go for synchronicity and meaningful coincidence. And like, it's so much fun.
It is fun. And we've adopted your how good can it get expression. It's beautiful. It's like such a simple thing to reset and open up possibility. I'm wondering, because you mentioned, I can't remember what it was, but like what exercises do you use? Oh, and part of where my question, let me ask this. We just started this school to teach a lot of this stuff to kids. Telekinesis, telepathy, weather manipulation, working with energy, all that stuff. And I don't know if you have any exercises that you think might be really fun, specifically to do with kids.
Well, kids are wonderful. So you're doing some good ones. Psychokinesis is good. You can work with them to make little, if you get some plastic boxes, this is a fun thing I used to do with workshops, is a little sealed plastic box, and then inside on the lid, you turn it upside down. So the lid of the little plastic box, it should be see-through so you can see inside. And on the lid, you can create like some clay or something and stick a pin on it, and then balance on top of that head of the pointy end of the needle. Create a little aluminum foil. It looks like a pinwheel.
Side wheel, yeah.
Yeah, and it can spin inside. Then you put the case back together, and without using any heat, or you don't need to put your hands over it. So it should be able to be operated just through intention. You could be able to get spinning motion going, and that's a fun thing to do with kids. They're also usually really good at spoon bending, so you could do a spoon bending party. All those things are fun. And then you mentioned the weather changing. That's a good one. Telepathy is good, communicating with animals, and really learning that with telepathy, everything is listening to you. For adults, that seems to be the confusion factor, that they think that they're going to be, now I'm going to be listening to my pet. And I feel like the thing that the adults seem to not realize, and some kids even have gotten enculturated to think that nobody knows what you're thinking. That's so not true. And animals are especially good at reading our thoughts. And they're reading not just the brain waves from the cephalic head, but also from the cardiac brain and also from the enteric gut brain. Like animals can smell fear, but they're really picking up the brain waves from the gut. And then Heart Math Institute works with the heart coherence, of course. So a lot of heart math stuff would be good for kids. But, in the indigenous games that indigenous kids used to play, they would do the psychic games. Like we do things like very similar to when you do rock and paper and scissors, and you could do that behind your back. The Native American kids were doing games like that, but I think they were doing it with animals and so forth. So it's kind of a telepathy where kids can play the game, but also what they really are working on is telepathically both, the person who's playing behind their back, they're blocking, concealing what they're doing, trying to. Because remember, everybody's psychic and everybody is actually quite telepathic, much more receptive than we realize, much more psychokinetics too. So this kind of a game is a fun one, just a real time, get some, fun experience, seeing if you can guess, you can just do it with rock, paper, scissors because people know that. But you can either do it so it's concealed or try variations of it. Try letting the kids make up new variations. Like, how can you change this so it's more fun? Ask them, because they're still open-minded. Ask them to create new games that invite everybody they're working with to expand their abilities, because it's all about expanding an existing capability set. And we've already got these abilities. Most of them are lying somewhat dormant, or we've actively suppressed them in some way. And then definitely bring in many of the contact modalities of opening up that kind of, unblocking the left brain. And you can do it by, things like chanting, dancing, drumming, the things that shamans have been doing. Music is very good. There's a whole book about contact modalities that's all about opening that up. And it was co-authored by Grant Cameron and Desta Barnaby. And it's called Contact Modalities. And a bunch of those might be good for kids. It just goes through dozens, if not hundreds of these, like, ways to basically reopen the giving oneself permission to do all this. And you might think kids don't need it, but they actually do. It's amazing how enculturated they get by age 5 even, or let alone age 7. So it's good to help them just give them like a different exercise each day. Like, today we'll be chanting, today we'll be drumming, and that's kind of fun. And let them know the goal is to open up your dream space, your daydream space. And when they know that that's what they're doing it for, that purpose, then they can try different things and find what works for them. Because intuition is so important, and kids are great at dowsing, working with energy rods, and they can expand or contract their energy field and see that happen real time, just with regular coat hangers. It doesn't need to be anything expensive. And kids they have so much fun with all this. And then you can say, like, okay, now expand your field. And then the friend can see, like, whoa, look where it is now. So fun stuff like that.
Yes.
There's so many more things you can do. So much. Kids are the future for sure.
My dad used to tell this story about his grandfather who was a dowser, and like people would, bring him in to find out where to dig for water, or to find out, where to put their house or stuff like that. So he always told that story, and I was like, maybe we should get a set of dowsing rods. And so ordered a set of the copper L-shaped dowsing rods and handed them to him. Exactly. Yeah, the ones that can swing freely.
Yeah.
And I was like, why don't you go out in your front yard and see if you can douse for the holes, like the pipes, the water pipes. And they would cross when he went like across the water main. He was like, I can do it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I bring my dad up because he's like both a skeptic and a willing believer at the same time, which I think a lot of people sort of fall into that camp.
I think that's a good place to be. It's not so far. Your mind's not so open that your brains are falling out, but it's open enough. Like, you got enough skepticism. Like, well, let's see. I need a little proof here. I need some kind of confirmation, validation, verification. So that's cool. It's cool that happened.
Yeah. Myself, I was trained as a scientist as well, went to grad school. And the way I sort of look at it, it was like really good for me to understand how science works these days. Like, what is the inner workings of the machine, so to speak, and designing good experiments and inquiry and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's the fundamental problem in science is that we don't account for the participation of the scientists, and the fact that we're trying to isolate the thing that we're studying from the rest of the world around it, and isolation is sort of impossible.
Yes.
So do you think science, like how we're doing science, is it actually accurate? Is it worth doing it the way that we do it?
I love the work speaking of scientists that I greatly respect and admire, Dr. Dean Radin is one of those, and his new book about real magic actually asks that question, because if the direction of the research he's doing and is reporting on is true, which it seems to be, it shows that individuals can and do affect the very experiment that they're in. Like, he'll do these kinds of experiments, such as working with an interferometer. I was actually fortunate to be in that experiment that he did just the other year, and he constructed interferometers that he sent to 50 people. And we were just told, as members of the group, we were just told that what we'd be doing is attempting to influence something that's the most delicate piece of instrumentation known to scientists right now that you can kind of mass produce, like print out the little device and ship it out. Still kind of expensive. My little device arrived and it was wrapped in metallic wire. The whole thing was shiny. So I knew that, this one has a Faraday cage. Cool. So, no problem. So I was still able to influence it. I knew I could. What I didn't know is that what Dean Radin was really doing is looking at what he calls magicians and meditators. And so the people that were just meditating, and they're good at that. They've been doing it for decades. Nothing wrong with that. But they're not practicing influencing reality like what you're doing with your kids, like changing the weather and stuff. Versus the magicians would be like the kids that come through your program. The magicians both groups could have some effect, but the magicians had a phenomenal, profound effect on, influencing something, even inside the Faraday cage, that, according to materialist rational science, a subjective observer cannot do that. An observer, you're just watching it. You can't influence a device without touching it. And if you touch that interferometer, it goes squawk, the whole thing, it'll pick up even if a very large car drives by the house. So you can't affect with it or mess with it. And so to change the way it's responding to the pattern of light is such a delicate process that the fact that we're able to do that clearly indicates something's going on. So the science, I think, and then where I'm going with all this, Dean, he does these experiments, he's reporting on them, he's brilliant. And then he points out, okay, if this is really true, like I'm seeing that it must be, then this is kind of the end of science as we know it. It's exactly what you're getting at, because our old assumptions that you can do these experiments and the experimenter themselves is not influencing it. I think we have to throw that out as well, because everybody that's involved influences. And that's where science is going, but we don't yet have the foundation of how does that work. We have the experimental process that you have a hypothesis and you set up your experimental apparatus and then you get your results and you can objectively observe it. But what if you can't objectively observe it? What if objectivity is gone? And I think that one's been gone for a long time, ever since quantum physics came in. But until now, we haven't really been bold enough to start calling for, we need a new science here, We need a new math of things like that amplituhedron that I was referring to earlier. I didn't really say it, but that's one kind of mathematics that might help us start thinking in a new way. And we need a new process too. How do we conduct this kind of science? If we know that we're having this effect, then how do we move forward now?
Yeah, it's so interesting. My research was in extremophiles in Yellowstone, and I did this big survey. I went out to all these different hot springs, boiling acid hot springs, to look for viruses and largely archaea. Single-celled organisms that live in extreme environments are usually archaea instead of bacteria. And I discovered a couple new species, and it was really exciting. And now I sort of wonder because I did have a wonderful eureka moment as a scientist where I saw for the first time in my electron microscope this thing that I knew for sure was my virus, and because it didn't look like anything I had ever seen, and it was definitely biological. I was like, oh, this is it, eureka. I almost wonder if I manifested that now. Yeah, because it was such a cool, that's kind of why I went back to grad school, because I wanted to have an experience like that.
Yeah, totally. I think we manifest each other sometimes, like I'm new for you. I met a physicist who I attended. He was in a movie called Particle Fever, but he's not a particle physicist. He's the kind of physicist, particle physicists are not, no offense to them, but they're not my big thing. Much more into the theoretical physics. So he's a theoretical physicist, and I saw his nameplate up on the front. There was going to be a question and answer after the movie, and there's his name, Yasunori Nomura. And I'm thinking, this is great. He's not in my book Quantum Jumps because he didn't exist then, but I always show illustrations from his papers and talk about his ideas. If we see half of a chair that's obscured behind a wall, he has a picture that shows this. We know that the rest of the chair must be there. It's because it's entangled, it's coherent with the half we do see. We don't expect a big smear of probability waves on the other half of that chair. So it's a perfect illustration. I use it all the time. So I'm just seeing his name up there. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's there. So when I met him, I said, I said, I want it. Well, he saw I just lit up like, yay, which is great for him because there he is surrounded by 4 particles. Sorry, no offense. He looked like he'd been drinking a little bit too, which is understandable. Again, no offense to the particle physicists, but yeah, I love the theoretical. But he said, when I told him, because we had tea later and I'm talking about what I'm interested in, and I told him, don't take this the wrong way, but you didn't used to exist. And I know for sure that I would have known about you because I did a lot of research in like Google Scholar looking for articles. Your name never showed up. Now you're ubiquitous. You co-authored papers with Alan Guth, who won the $1 Million Prize and everything. And Yasunori was just like, yeah. And I was like, what? I mean, because he really gets it. He's like, yeah, of course I didn't exist. Yeah, but now I am. And that's how I feel when people tell me that too. But I was prepared to, I wanted to be there for emotional support. He didn't need any emotional support. Like, yeah. Like, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
He's really sharp. So a lot of our theoretical physicists know about this increasingly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, I'm excited about a lot of the work that's being done. And, there's a book that I just got by Federico Fagin, the inventor of the microprocessor. And it's, I think it's called Inseparable or something. And it's basically just laying out the foundation of where we are now, like in physics, mathematics. And then he's going, because he's an experiencer of conscious phenomenon like we are. I haven't read the part yet where he gets there, but he's just a delight to see when I see his interviews recently on the Essentia Foundation, for example, talking with Hans. Just brilliant because he likes the same philosophy I like, which is like Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who's one of the inventors of calculus, and he's a process philosopher and an optimist. So totally, I see him as the father of consciousness, where I see consciousness going, like the metacognition I've been talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
And so does Federico Fagin. So I'm thinking, wow, he's on the right track. So very much, I'm reading his book slowly because I treasure it. Sometimes I go really slowly when I love a book, sometimes really fast, but I read different ways, different times. But that's an excellent book for anybody interested in that.
Yeah, you've mentioned quite a few books and movies. It's wonderful. Are you doing any research, or where is your work headed these days?
Right now, not doing research per se, but I'm interested in this topic of the metacognition, the levels of conscious agency. Like who's pushing reality when there's that, like a tug of war between two realities? What's going on there? That's my fascination. And I recognize that we do need the new mathematics for that. I need to finish reading Federico Fagin's book, obviously. I'm staying on track with most every single interview that comes out of the Essentia Foundation. They're brilliant. And I'm conducting in-person events, sometimes in Crestone. I'll be doing one in May of this year, and then we're planning probably to do another one in August of this year. So people get a couple chances to talk in person. I think there's something special about being in person together, and like you like to do, exploring around the place if you have time. Like you're in a special place, check it out. And I was telling you about Crestone, and you told me some things I didn't know about some amazing local things that people could do. But
Do you want to give the full details of that now that we're talking about it?
sure, that's going to be, I think the dates are May 22nd to the 24th, and it's in Crestone, Colorado. If you want to find out more, my website today, that's the one that you've got the link to, realityshifters.com. And if you go to the events page, it'll show you the details and the link, which is through a different website, starworksusa.com. And that's Paula Harris's website. She's also the facilitator and collaborator that's putting it together. And then Dr. Aaron Judkins, he's like an Indiana Jones in real life archaeologist, checking out amazing sites such as Göbekli Tepe. And also he did a documentary on Noah's Ark, which I thought was really great. So he's doing that kind of work, and he'll have things to talk about. We'll be talking about UFOs and consciousness and ancient archaeology. So it's kind of like bringing the past together with the future. Where are we going? Where are we headed? And what have we not been told about what's really going on? So it'll be fun. And it's fun to do this in person. It's fun to be out under the stars and actually see the stars, because Crestone's tiny and there's almost no light pollution. So, and even if it's cloudy, no problem. We we do that thing you're teaching your kids. We just clear the sky above us. So it's a big circle, clear space. That pretty much always happens. And then last time we saw a really big spaceship or craft that was over the mountains where there was thunder and lightning. It looked like the scene from that movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So it was pretty amazing and fun and so much love. And it's just a wonderful experience. So
There's always a lot of activity in that area.
yes.
Yeah. I've camped out on the sand dunes a couple of times, and it's
Wow.
amazing. That should be so
Yeah.
fun.
Yes. And it makes it fun when you're with other people. You can compare notes and really recognize the difference of experience that people are having when they're sitting right next to you. Because, that is what happens, but some of it will be shared as well. So to the degree we become coherent and, like one flock or one herd of shared consciousness, then we can have a shared experience. And when you know you're doing that, it makes it really fun.
And I think I read an article recently that you were talking about the Hopi prophecy as
Yes.
well, which is like the bifurcating timelines experience. And, I had basically arrived at the conclusion. So there's the Hopi prophecy of the blue star Kachina and the red star Kachina.
Yes.
And I was doing remote viewing and telepathic contact with 3i Atlas as it was approaching.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure that's the blue star Kachina, is that object, which indicates that we're in the bridge time between the fourth and fifth worlds right
Yeah,
now.
we totally are in the bridge time, that for sure. Yeah, I'm feeling it. And yeah, if you're referencing, I wrote an article about this, and then my most recent YouTube video and Substack article, I go into detail about Grandfather Martin. He's a Hopi elder who's passed away now, but he had a video, and in that video, I saw 3 Mandela effects. One with the Hopi prophecy rock, well, 2 of them concerning that. Actually, they all kind of concern that, actually. It's pretty amazing. It's just like, how is this changing? You expect the Hopi prophecy rock to not be changing, but the Bible changes. Hopi prophecy rock, he points out in the video, it used to have a third line that's gone. And he says this is some kind of magic. Yeah, he says that in his video. And then, so that's him admitting that this. And to me, that's really a cool indicator, because I read these Mandela effects. That is an indication that, like you said, we're in the bridge time. In the bridge time, then I would expect the third line to be like, don't even fixate on that. Look just at where you guys are going. Which line are you on? Are you on the line, the lower line that goes to the fifth world, or on that upper line? Then Mandela effect number 2, he says these beings have 2 hearts, these world leaders, the first 3 on the upper line. That feels, he didn't say what it means to him, but if I saw that and pointed it out, I'd be saying, do you notice there's a duplicitous nature for the world leaders on the top line? They're leading people in a duplicitous way. I'd say, watch out for someone that's like 2 faces, 2 hearts,
So the top line is like third dimension, linear reality kind of.
That fizzles out. That's a dead end. It doesn't really go anywhere. But the bottom line is the line that continues on. And even an old person with a little walking stick makes it just fine. So it's not, you don't have to be survival of the fittest mindset. No, it's more like just having your heart open to each other and your crown chakra open. So those are pretty big changes. And then the mind blower, the third one, there's a second Hopi prophecy rock. And he shows it, and he talks about, for those of us who make it to the fifth world, now that's showing up. So the third line's gone, and a second Hopi prophecy rock has appeared, showing us the new technology to heal ourselves and the earth and the water when we enter the fifth world. So that is huge. And then I'm getting reports that I share in my Substack and on the video about people showing up at a crowded hospital where they just drop their husband off and they have to go park. It's going to take a while because there's so many people there. All the cars are there. Then they come into the ER and there's nobody in there. And the husband's already been admitted to a room and all the other rooms are empty. But every single staff member they talk to says, boy, how long did you have to wait? It is so crowded tonight. Like, my husband's already in there. I just parked and came in. Like, no time at all. But everybody kept saying that. And the person wrote to me and said, does this mean that this is what it's going to feel like when we're in that bridge, like you're calling it the bridge time? Yes, indeed, the bridge time. Both worlds are here. Yes, that is what it feels like.
That story makes me wonder about the experiences of the nurses. Like, clearly, because I read your Substack, so they're not seeing the crowds of people, but they are talking to the nurses who are seeing the crowds of people. So it's like the nurses are in both
Yes.
experiences at the same time, but the person who wrote in was in one discrete experience.
Yes.
So what do you think is the experience of the actual nurses?
It depends. It's like case by case. I would expect some of them might be aware that it's like, yeah, it was busy, but it wasn't when they came into the ER. They might be, for me, that's what a Mandela effect feels like when it's one that I've experienced. It's like sometimes I do remember something both ways, and it's the weirdest feeling. So if a person's that's someone like me that's open to metacognition, which it's like, if you're familiar with Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz's work about the monads and about you just observe at a higher level of conscious agency. I'm now using the term that we would use, conscious agency. And this is where all of this new science has to go. We have to be aware of who are we and at what level are we observing this right now. So when we ask a question we want to live the answer to, like if those nurses are asking my favorite question, how good can it get? They're going to be in a metacognitive state automatically. So those are the ones that are more likely to notice. Yeah, I think I saw it crowded and uncrowded tonight. They're going to be open to that because they can be walking that way. And at some point they may just I'm going to stay with the uncrowded, where everything's just groovy and it's not so repressive and stressed out.
Is the monad, that word you just mentioned, is that like the higher self, or what is the monad?
That we can spend hours talking about that. So I didn't mean to unfortunately bring it up. I would love to see the work of Leibniz explored a lot more fully and brought current into this modern age of physics. Leibniz would love what we're seeing right now, with the subjectivity being recognized in science. So his idea of monad would be like what's behind what's creating all this. So a monad is like the operational aspect of consciousness itself as it's having an effect on what we call reality. So it's not exactly the most up-to-date term. And that's why I'm reading the book by Federico Fagin. I'm really interested to see where we go with this and what comes next, because that's what I'm most interested in. These levels of conscious agency, that's us as we're leveling up, as we're expanding our dimensional awareness and recognizing we need new math, we need new science. Right.
Because now that I'm thinking about it, I had a friend refer to a group of people that she seemed to be traveling with spiritually, like spiritual brothers and sisters that were kind of like on the same wavelength as her. She was like, this is our monad group. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like people that she will like meet in different places around the world. They seem to sync up and they're like working on similar projects at the same time. Like when we were in Sedona, one of these people happened to be in Sedona at the exact same time, but they didn't like inform each other of that. But they just like were going to even the same vortex sites on the same day without, planning it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a fine, often words have many meanings, and so it seems appropriate and fitting. I like it. And it seems to fit a little bit of what Leibniz was getting into as well. The idea that the consciousness is creating. And I think you get a sense of that when you feel like I've got a monad group. It's like, what does that mean? If you press them to explain it further, they might actually say there's like a consciousness that we bring together, and that we can feel more fully like ourselves and more expansive individually and as a group. We're good for each other. We're good for the group. This could be where human consciousness is evolving to as well.
Yeah, like different sub-collectives within the larger collective.
Yes.
Focusing on different things. Very cool stuff. Anything that I haven't talked to you about or asked you about that you would like to touch on?
Such a big subject. We didn't talk about the books that I've written, but I talked about other people's books, but I did publish a book on the aura talking about dowsing, and that's Aura Advantage. I've got a book that covers that, pulling a dollar bill after a dollar bill out of a wallet. That one is The Reality Shifter's Guide to High Energy Money. And then I've also published that book, Reality Shifts, When Consciousness Changes the Physical World. That one's good for people who are very naturally intuitive and They don't need all the explanation of what's going on necessarily. They just want to make it practical for their lives. And then I've got a book that's more mainstream that you can just put on your coffee table and show to anyone, and it's for left brain thinkers, called Quantum Jumps. And that's a really great book about the same topic. So I've been covering the same material lots of different ways. And then my newest book is the one we've been talking about, The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Awakening from Me to We. And it goes into Carl Jung and Philip K. Dick and what they experienced. Several of the modern day researchers, including Mary Rose Barrington, that I never met and didn't know about, but she had a whole, like a language to describe this whole phenomenon of things appearing and disappearing. And I heard about it through Jeffrey Mishlove when he interviewed me. I thought, wow, where'd she come from? But so she's got a book about just one of those things, Jot. But I cover all this in my book. I do the best I can with Mandela Effect and Its Society to be completely current with everything I currently know. So it did take many years to write that book. But I also intend it to be excellent for experienced people, as well as kind of a textbook to cover the history, the science, some of my personal experiences with it. And then where is it going, which to me is human expansion, human development. What you're doing with the classes that you're teaching for kids is exactly it. It's recognizing that we have so much untapped potential. And as we learn more about what's possible, it starts opening up. And we can guide the future by asking the questions we most wish to live the answers to, which is what I love about that. How good can it get? Rather than like, oh, this went wrong, that went wrong, these bad things come in threes, what next? So the opposite of that would be, how good can it get? And it's really challenging reality. Like, okay, things look kind of grim, but how good can it get? Or things look really good, how good can it get? Just needing to know it. And that's the work of, I want to credit John Archibald Wheeler, because he's the one that talked about that participatory universe, and he was a colleague of Albert Einstein. And he's the reason that I'm focusing on the question aspect, because when you ask nature a question, nature answers. So let's ask good questions, even with just our thoughts. Even if you think, well, I'm just thinking it to myself. Yeah, remember, everybody hears you, everybody's psychic, whole universe is listening. So ask good questions. Yes. And that way, it's going to be a great future for all of us.
Yeah, I had some time ago when I was first becoming a coach, I had this vision of how questions work. It's like it opens up this sort of box, and like as soon as you ask the question, it like opens a receptacle for the result or the answer to fall into. And it's like, yes. But you're like directing what falls in by how you frame the question.
And you'll notice, how good can it get? It's kind of open-ended. I'll sometimes ask, how good can I get? So there's the reality, and then there's me. And I like to, so if you want to do a refinement, how good can I get? So it's an awareness. You're giving that gift to your subconscious, that your subconscious knows what good is. It means healthy, happy, prosperous, connected, just vibing in a good way. Very going higher and higher. So it goes into gratitude and reverence and ecstasy and happiness, and just feeling like, wow, what a magical place and time to be alive, and how grateful I am to be here. So that is what the subconscious responds to, but it's pretty wide open. And I do that on purpose. And so otherwise, I see a lot of people that paint themselves into corners without meaning to, like they're asking for just so much, but they could have had so much more. Like they could have had good health too, and good relationships while they're at it, not just win at career.
Yeah, because it's like, you might be able to think of 30 ways that it could get better, but there's really infinite ways it could get better. Yeah. So of course you're going to be limited to some degree.
Yeah.
There was one more thing that I just saw. I had a note to ask you about, which I find interesting. Species becoming unextinct.
Yes.
Speaking of good news.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is a huge one, especially if it would be up your alley with the biology background. So one of the big ones that's illustrated in the book, that the Mandela Effect and Its Society, it's the coelacanth. I don't know if I can just flip the book and show it, but it's kind of a prehistoric looking fish. I mean, the thing is huge. No, I can't. Don't have it dog-eared to pop open. Well, I do have some illustrations in the book. I'm not flipping right to it. Anyway, well, you can look it up. It's spelled differently than it sounds. It's coelacanth is the pronunciation. It's spelled C. Oh, here it is. There. Okay, that one.
Okay. That's like a deep water ocean fish?
Yes. And it was considered completely extinct. It was one of those sad things where we had these huge fish at one time, but now it's gone. So, well, now it's back. And it's, the large male, let's see, weighs about 200 pounds. That's like the size of a person.
Yeah.
And it measures like 6.5 feet long, really about the length and weight of a person. They live 60 years, and they thrive about 2,300 feet below the surface of the ocean. And so they look very primitive, and they were thought to go, they thought they're gone. They were extinct 65 million years ago. Kind of like along with the dinosaurs kind of a thing, because these are like dinosaur fish. But then when they were found in South Africa, and then later in Indonesia, it's like they just keep finding more of them. Like they're not only not extinct, they seem to be thriving. Like, what? How is that possible? And it's not just the coelacanth. So I have a whole section in the book with animals and plants that keep popping up, like we're here. And some of them have been gone tens of thousands of years. Others have been gone millions of years. And this was also predicted by the Hopi, if you read about their oral traditions, they said, it's kind of like the Blue Star Kachina. It's like the bridge time thing. Kind of like, you're entering the fifth world when plants and animals that have been long gone are coming back. And they are. So it's another one. And then some of the indigenous people say when the white buffalo is born, you're in that bridge time.
And there was a white buffalo, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So these sacred things are happening, and the signs are here, and it gives me goosebumps of happiness. I feel like, oh, yay. Remember, how good can it get when we enter the fifth world? It's going to be great. Instead of saying like, oh my gosh, it's going to be back to the Stone Age, cancel. No, I've already seen the second Hopi prophecy rock. There's new technology on it. That's new to me. That's
maybe
like,
the technology is stone technology, though. Maybe it's high-tech stones.
That's fine with me. Good tech that heals us and heals the earth. That sounds good.
Have you seen those artifacts they're uncovering in Mexico? The like alien carved artifacts, and it's like if you rotate the stone, then the whole stone glows.
Wow.
They have this
I haven't seen that happen
yet. I saw it's like a sleeve, a stone sleeve that you put on, and then there's like a watch dial on it, and it like lights up, and it glows with no energy source.
Wow.
It's pretty epic.
I was thinking of the Buga sphere, which was found in Colombia, and then Paula Harris, she went down, she happened to be synchronistically in Mexico City at the time, and so she definitely got to hold that and look at that. And that's that thing was totally not the kind of technology that we know. It had ancient scriptures writing on it, very old, kind of like ancient Sumerian or something, but it's flying around in the air like a little UFO, like a drone, but with no means to propel it. And then it kept its mass was changing as it arrived in Mexico
That was so
City.
Cool. Like every time they tried to crack into it, it got heavier.
Yeah, right. Like, what the heck? Yeah. So it's definitely something, and this is the age that we're finding these spheres. I think that some have been seen before, but it was definitely covered up. Now there's less of the cover up, and there's more keeping this for the people instead of having it get glommed onto by some world superpower. And then we never see it again. So that's what's really cool right now.
Well, Cynthia, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for your work, all of your research and diligent, creating all these books, different ways to explain it to people and bringing them into your world. So yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I love talking with you today.
Well, we'll talk soon.
Yeah.